Hi folks, I received this message from someone called Birkin. Darrell, I want to ask you a single deep question because I am seriously puzzled, so I would be grateful if you can help me out here. When you were describing your experience of meditation as a Christian, I had the understanding that you were meditating on an idea as an image projected outwards from the inside of your mind. Whereas in non-dual sense, there is nothing there to be meditated on other than your own being, or should I say, the fullness of your being. Am I correct so far? Yeah, I think I'm with you so far. And what you're saying is correct. You know, when you are thinking about a deity, a God, that God is not really there in any objective sense whatsoever. Before I move on with your message, let's talk a little bit about the value of prayer in relation to non-duality, non-dual philosophy. I don't pray, but I can see how it's useful from two perspectives. One is that it allows you to be very, very honest with yourself. If you conceptualize a God who sees you completely, a God that you can't hide anything from, and yet who accepts you with all of your flaws and shortcomings, and you have a conversation with this imaginary being that you've conceived of. Of course, it helps if you don't think it's imaginary. It helps if you really buy into it. You have that kind of a conversation. That's really just a means of you being very honest with yourself. In other words, not repressing anything. You know, I've had conversations like this in the past with God as a Christian, where I was just very honest about my very real problems in life. And I don't mean external problems like there's something wrong in my life as a situation. I mean real psychological garbage. I've known what it's like to be very honest with God, and more importantly, very honest with myself by being very honest with God. So, in the final analysis, it doesn't really matter whether God's real or not. You cleaned out your own psyche by being honest with yourself, by not repressing anything. That's the way to forgive yourself. And that's what's really important. So that's the first part. The second part is the more weirder one that has to do with parapsychology or the occult, where you make a prayer. And I don't mean you just mouth a few words. I mean you project real, raw, heartfelt desire for something towards this deity. It doesn't really matter what direction, what direction this desire goes in. It's just the projection of the will outward from the self, and that is the essence of magic, the real deal, not stage magic. It is also the essence of prayer. I don't see any real difference between magic and prayer and something like psychokinesis. Project the will outwards from the self, and sometimes you get results. So again, it helps that you think there's a deity who's there to answer your prayers. It helps you believe in what you're doing. So those are the only two reasons that I think are good ones for any kind of prayer, any kind of focus upon a deity, because ultimately I know it's a kind of fooling oneself. It's not really there. And I think you can do the same kinds of things without the deity. I can simply choose to be very honest with myself and forgive myself for my problems. Don't need a God for that. I can also do something of a magical nature without any reliance on a deity by just seeing myself as inseparable from the universe and simply trusting that there are connections between everything that allows a parapsychological effect to occur. If that makes any sense. Okay, that was just the first part of what you're saying. So don't get too hung up on this thing about God and meditation. It can be done with or without a God. A God is just a useful... Michael Aquino had a really good term for it. He referred to ritualistic magic as training wheels. So by ritualistic I mean the invoking of a god. That's like magic done with training wheels, but you can use the training wheels or throw them away when you no longer need them. So think of it like that. There's no need to conceptualize a god if you don't need to. Now here's where I think things get really interesting with your message. So here is what baffles me. Non-duality implies that the infinite or true self is impersonal, and by impersonal I assume it means that it doesn't have any attributes to it. So how can there be such a thing as objective truth if there isn't any set of principles, attributes, as a center which all reality originates from? Because we describe ourselves as truth seekers, doesn't that mean we are progressing towards an objective truth? To put it simply, how can objective truth exist in a subjective universe? And if it exists, doesn't that make it personal? Anything will be deeply appreciated. Have a good day and a good life. Just what you say at the end, have a good life. That's like what somebody says when they're about to go. I hope that's not the case. I'm sure it isn't. Right at the beginning, you said something that immediately struck me that I want to offer a slightly different perspective on. Non-duality implies that the infinite or true self is impersonal, and by impersonal I assume it means that it doesn't have any attributes to it. Isn't impersonal an attribute? So you can't say it's impersonal and it doesn't have any attributes to it. You see, when we speak of the infinite, or the ground of being, or whatever your favorite term might be, we're alluding to an impenetrable mystery that lies I'm trying to think of the right way to word this. I was going to say it lies beyond appearances, but it also is the appearances, if you know what I mean. Nothing is separate from it. This that you see around you, this is reality, but it's also just the tip of the iceberg, if that makes any sense. So let's try not to separate anything. It's the impenetrable mystery behind everything that you see, and it includes everything that you see. So there's reality, which is truth, say, whatever that might be. Reality is the objective truth. But we're stuck as these subjective creatures trying to figure out what reality is, and we never get to it because we're forced into a position of having this limited perception on everything, and then we have to slice it up into little pieces and examine all the pieces and how they relate to each other. So we have these models of reality, and the model is never reality, if that makes any sense. You know, Isaac Newton had a model of reality that is now outdated. Stephen Hawking has a model of reality. Other theoretical physicists have slightly different models of reality. They're all just models. They're not reality. They're all just a symbol system that allows us to break reality up into segments and examine it. But do you ever really get to see all the segments? No. So there is truth. There is reality. There is objective truth. But we never see it. We're always scratching the surface of it, making approximations. We always have to come back to this appreciation that reality is a mystery. And not be frustrated by that, but simply accept that that is the way it is. Reality is a mystery, but reality is you. Benjamin Smythe said in one of his recent videos that something along the lines of, you can't understand yourself because the mind is the factor from which all questions arise. So how can the mind ask questions about itself? How can the self ask questions about itself when the self is where the questions arise from? That makes a kind of sense, does it? Be very careful not to fall into the trap of thinking of this personal-impersonal divide as a false alternative. In other words, if it's not personal, it must be impersonal. If it's not impersonal, it must be personal. The reason why that's a false alternative is because they are both attributes. They're both categories applying to everything within space-time, everything within the universe as we perceive it. The infinite is that which cannot be imagined. Reality is that which cannot be imagined. And I think if you spend a little time just thinking about that predicament that you're in, you're always faced with mystery. I think, you know, if you're anything like me, you should be allowed just to settle into that, appreciate it, and then you walk around your life and you look around you, and this is all amazing. Everything's amazing. Life is this delicious, marvelous mystery that never ends. It ends for the creature, sure, but you're not the creature. The creature is just a little coat that you wear. And you're the thing that's wearing all the coats. You're reality. You are the infinite. So when one coat wears away, you put on another coat, and you're wearing all the coats at the same time. Okay, I think I'm done. Maybe there's something of value in there for you.